we are going to talk about the challenges in today's master data management. And those challenges are rooted in ongoing changes in requirements that are making the enterprise architecture and overall data architecture for MDM systems increasingly complex, hard to deal with, and very difficult to change as time goes on. So we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about how MDM isn't really shaped as a hierarchy, it's shaped as a graph, and we'll give you some examples. We'll also talk about use cases of how we're already helping some of the largest companies in the world tackle their MDM challenges. And then, as Adam mentioned, we'll save lots of time for your questions at the end. So please do type those into the question panel. So master data management, MDM, is not new, but the challenges that we're seeing in MDM are new, and they're increasing in the last couple of years. And it's a problem that we can't ignore. It's very important that we get the MDM solution right. You see here from, this is InsightSquared.com, said that having good data quality can boost your revenues by some 66% or so, and the inverse is also true. If you have bad data quality, that can cost businesses more than $600 billion a year. This is an important problem and something you've got to get right. But as we said, there are these ongoing and increasing challenges with MDM systems. The hierarchical shape of traditional MDM architectures really doesn't fit. It's too strict, it's too hard to change, and it doesn't reflect how the data actually live and relate to one another. Non-hierarchical data is not supported at all, whether you're using a relational database or some NoSQL database. Unless it's Neo4j and a graph, you are not dealing with your data relationships the way you really need to, especially when you've got real-time requirements. Because of this lack of support for hierarchical relationships, today's MDM systems aren't able to unlock the value from the data relationships that they need to unlock. In today's scenario, people are only able to answer simple queries that look at simple data relationships. The complex relationships go unnoticed or just unrecognized and not surfaced to the top. Then, even once you have your system well designed, when you need to make changes to respond to the ongoing business changes and challenges, your systems are inflexible and very expensive to change and maintain. Even Gartner is saying that master data management is not hierarchical. It's actually a network. And we have found several different kinds of networks as we're talking to our customers and they're dealing with their MDM challenges. Top left, you see the organizational hierarchy. Bottom left, this is an example of how product subscriptions might be handled. Top right, you see the typical social network type of graph, and the CMDB network inventory is represented there on the bottom right. This gives you an idea of the different types of configurations that MDM can take. All of this adds up to new changes, new requirements for today's changing MDM. You have to continually accommodate new data relationships, and you have to maintain the fidelity between the real world and how your data is stored. So you need to reimagine your hierarchies as graphs. Neo4j is an enterprise-grade graph database that lets you model and store your MDM data as it exists, as a graph. This means that you can query those data relationships very easily, and you can meet your real-time SLAs, and you can change your applications as you need to. This leads to high performance, really great scalability, and it's much easier to maintain this way. So we've got several use cases that we're going to talk about today. These are real companies who've solved this problem very well. The first is a German insurance company, Bayerische. They have been around for more than 150 years, or almost 150 years. They have more than 500 employees, and they've really been able to tackle MDM in a way that they've set the new standard for the insurance vertical. The problem they had was that their field sales unit wasn't able to access policies and customer data easily and from a variety of devices, and trying to maintain fidelity between all the different data points. It just really wasn't working. At the same time that their company was growing very rapidly, so just compounding the problem. They had been using a very workable solution that would have been fine up until a couple of years ago, IBM DB2 system, but as time went on, that system just was not able to meet the performance requirements as these new scale situations and the new complexity was evolving. They absolutely needed to have a 24/7 system for the sales unit that could be accessed outside the company. They just weren't able to do this on their existing IBM system. They came to us, and we were able to put into place a system with them that enables their field sales unit to search for all insurance policies and personal data that they need to. And as their business is growing, the system is scaling very easily. They've been in production for a while now. They are running into no problems around scale or performance. They're able to add new data sets, new data points, new data types, evolve the model very easily, and they're really happy with it. As an added benefit, they were actually able to port their metadata into Neo4j really easily. That was a happy surprise for them. Another large company has had similar success. So Telenor is a Norwegian telecommunications company. They're number 10 in the world, and they are also growing very, very rapidly. In fact, a couple of years ago, they found themselves at a point where they were growing so quickly and their data relationships were becoming so complex that their nightly batch workarounds weren't working, and they were facing a situation where they were not going to be able to add any new customers within about 11 months. If they had kept the status quo, they literally were not going to be able to let their company grow anymore. So of course, that's not something they could have let happen. Now, what they were dealing with was, of course, they have millions of plans and customers and different groups. All of this is highly connected data with massive joins. This was degrading the performance. It was taking many, many minutes for users to receive their access rates. Once they had signed up for a service, there was a huge delay between signing up and then actually getting access. So that nightly batch workaround that they had been using that, would have been okay up until a couple of years ago, just wasn't going to be tenable for the future. So they replaced that slow Sybase system, and now they no longer have any of those delays in their data. They are able to have real-time responses. Their responses are down to milliseconds now. They also found a couple of great benefits as well. The modeling in Neo4j was incredibly straightforward, and they realized that this is because their domain is inherently a graph, and that's what we're really emphasizing for you today, that your MDM data really is already in the shape of a graph. They no longer needed to have the nightly batch process, and they know that they've always got fresh data, not a snapshot of whatever was happening yesterday. We all know things can change really quickly, and we need to know what's going on with up-to-date data, and Telenor is able to have that. They found that they could really address the customer retention risks. So before they implemented this new solution, they knew that the customers were not happy with these delays when they signed up, paid for a new service, but weren't able to get access. So Telenor has been able to completely turn that around, and their customer retention numbers are terrific today. The business continues to grow, and they're able to handle it. And you can see here on the right-hand side a quote from Telenor just saying that the flexibility of the data representation is really helping them to go beyond what they could have done with traditional relational databases. A third use case that I'd like to just tell you a little bit about is CrunchBase. Now, CrunchBase is a free online directory of all the tech companies, people, investors, all the different relationships that exist between them. It's a huge thing in Silicon Valley, but it's really looking at companies all over the world. It's managed by TechCrunch and owned by AOL. So that lets you know that this is an enormous company tackling these MDM problems with Neo4j. So CrunchBase had the unhappy situation where their content was becoming increasingly difficult to manage. So they aggregate all of the different relationship information about all the different players, and they absolutely need up-to-date information that is easily accessed. And it was becoming increasingly difficult to do that in their existing solution. They had to make tough decisions about what to post, and because they needed to choose to conserve resources. And that's just not something that you can do when you're trying to run this kind of an application. The queries were often slow and inefficient, and they just weren't getting the value that they needed. They needed to pull more value out of the content to better serve users and customers, which tend to be a pretty demanding bunch, people who want to be able to do real-time search on what's happening in Silicon Valley and the tech world. They have very high expectations about the quality of information that they're going to see there. So CrunchBase was able to easily migrate their application into Neo4j, and this has helped them to manage the large and diverse set of content that is CrunchBase. That's what CrunchBase is made up of. This has allowed CrunchBase to maximize the value of their data because they're exploiting the data relationships that already exist. The query times have increased in efficiency, and they've also enjoyed much greater flexibility. And even with the better efficiency and flexibility, they are able to add more complex business rules so that their features offer even higher value as time goes on. Now, how is all of that possible? With Bayerische, Telenor, CrunchBase, and many others that we just won't even have time to talk about today. Why is it so different with Neo4j? There are a few things you need to understand. Once you realize that your MDM hierarchy is not a hierarchy at all, but is actually a graph, then you need to make sure that you're choosing the right graph database that will give you the ACID compliance and everything else that you need to really be trustable and have all of the features built in there that are so important. So with Neo4j, you have native graph storage and native graph processing. This is incredibly important that you find both native graph storage and processing in your graph database. I've talked a little bit about the data modeling. Now, when you think about modeling in Neo4j, just imagine writing on a whiteboard how you represent all of the different data types, data relationships, adding new data, everything that happens there on that whiteboard. That's exactly how you model for Neo4j. So you can just imagine how that helps with your flexibility across time. Neo4j is completely, fully ACID compliant. I can't overstate how important that is for your MDM solutions, but definitely keep that in mind as you're learning more about the different technologies available. Neo4j Neo4j can use native Java, and it also has Cypher, which is a powerful expressive query language that requires much less code than SQL. And this really helps with your development cycles and with your operational cycles as time goes on. You just find that it's much easier to work in Neo4j than really in any other type of database management system that you might be using for MDM. We just launched Neo4j 2.2 a couple of weeks ago, and the Cypher performance is even faster than before, up to 10 times faster than it used to be. So definitely do check that out. With Neo4j, you get the scalability and the high availability that you need. There's a certain type of scale that needs to happen with graph databases, and we've got that sorted. So we can definitely help you out with that. There's built-in ETL, so it's really easy to import from your existing solutions, and we've got tons of drivers and APIs for your existing architecture. So here are some common questions that we find when we're talking to folks about MDM. You're concerned about your existing infrastructure. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. We'll say a little bit more about whether Neo4j will scale for you. And then we're going to tell you about Neo4j and Neo itself. These are all important things for you to know as you make your decisions. So Neo4j definitely works in your infrastructure. There's that polyglot persistence there, and no need to worry about that. Neo4j plays well with others, and we've got lots of features that'll make that even easier for you. Getting your data into the graph is really easy. Keeping data in sync is also easy and very manageable. And learning Neo4j is intuitive and easy. We've got lots of different types of training. Cypher is really easy to learn. If you already know SQL, you'll be able to pick up Cypher easily. And like I said, we do also have the native Java API, and that's really easy to use. So a little bit more about loading data. Sometimes people just want to migrate all of their data. They take it all out of the relational database, put it into Neo4j, and that's fine. Sometimes people just want to migrate the graph data. So they keep their non-graph data in their existing database, and they pull the graph data into Neo4j. That's fine as well. And then sometimes people want to duplicate. So they still want to keep all of their data in a relational database, and at the same time duplicate and pull graph data into Neo4j. All of these are great solutions. Here's a little bit more about how Neo4j can fit into your environment. Like I said, Neo4j supports polyglot persistence. You can use any other sorts of NoSQL or Hadoop or relational databases that you're used to, and you'll be able to establish the storage and business rules that you need for your graph data. So you might be thinking, so will Neo4j scale? The answer is yes. Yes, we are working with Walmart, with eBay, with lots of enormous customers about having huge scale requirements, and we can get you all sorted for that. And it's easy to get started with Neo4j. The development times tend to be really short, and here's just a typical schedule for getting started, learning a little bit. You can deploy your application in as little as a couple of months. If that, we've had people go into production within a couple of weeks, depending on what their needs are, and we'll work really hard to partner with you and make sure you have everything you need to be set up for success there. Now, it's really important for you to know who you're working with as well. Neo Technology created today's modern graph database, which is Neo4j. We wrote it, and we've been working on it for more than a decade now. It's been in production for several years. Like I said, it has that full ACID compliance. It's fully production hardened and tested. We have really good funding from major players in the venture capital world, and we are represented all over the world. Our headquarters are in Silicon Valley, and we're also in London, Munich, Paris, Malmo, Sweden, and lots of other locales. We have a huge meetup infrastructure so that if you need to meet with people, talk, get any new ideas about what your environment is like, and get some troubleshooting done, there are literally people all over the world who can talk to you about that. Neo4j has more than 1 million downloads already, and we're adding 50,000 downloads per month. And there are more than 150 enterprise subscription customers. That number is actually getting up close to 200 subscription customers, including 50 of the Global 2000. So all of this is just to let you know you're in really good hands when you bring your MDM system over to Neo4j. So just to summarize what we've talked about a little bit today is your MDM data is not really a hierarchy. It's actually a graph. And you need to find the right system that will support hierarchical and matrix data structures. Your system needs to store, manage, and use complex data relationship information, and you need to be able to accommodate new data and relationships as time goes on. All of this needs to take place while you're maintaining fidelity between the real world and how your data is stored. Neo4j is the enterprise-ready graph database that will provide that fast development, high performance, and high scalability that you need. And with that, I'd like to open up the conversation to your questions. I know that Adam and Dave have been fielding the question box here, and let's turn it over.
Great, and thank you, Cami, for that really wonderful presentation. So the first question I think is great for you, Cami, and it's Christine is asking, so does this complement master data management or replace it? And so if you could speak a little bit about, how you would actually implement Neo4j would be great.
Okay, thanks. Hi, Christina. It's not so much replacing MDM. This is enabling you to do the MDM that you need to do today. So MDM is really hard, and people have been poking at it for some 15, 20 years, and up until now they haven't really had the database management system that they needed that would let them store the data the way it actually exists and really surface those complex data relationships so that they can get the value out of the data. It just really wasn't possible before. So this is the first time that we've got a database management system that enables everything that you actually need to be doing with your MDM.
Great, thanks. And Dave, I think this is a good one for you. Can you talk a little bit about the web interface with handling or creating nodes or adding properties to them, joining each other?
Sure. Yeah, definitely Neo4j is a NoSQL database, so it gives us great flexibility in managing the data, adding new node types, adding new relationships, adding properties to nodes and relationships. And you can do that in our existing Neo4j web-based interface by writing some Cypher queries. And Cypher's easy to understand, easy to learn. If you're familiar with any programming language or any SQL type language, it is easy to follow along and do your updates and data management. Additionally, we also provide drivers to all of the most popular programming languages, so you can write Java. We have Java API, we have Java drivers, we have .NET drivers, PHP, Ruby, Go, just a whole wide variety, and that information is on our neo4j.com/developer site. And there's plenty of code samples and plenty of resources there to help you connect to the database, to query your database, and to make those changes and updates as you go along.
Great, thanks, Dave. And just so that everyone knows, I did drop a link in the chat for the language drivers, so you can find those there. And then, Dave, one of your favorite questions, I have a few people asking about Hadoop and Neo4j. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I know a lot of questions come up on how do we get data either out of Hadoop into Neo4j to do either just to manage your data and visualize it and understand the relationships, or also how to do some analytics on that data. And we found that Neo4j can perform graph analytics really fast, so it's one thing to keep in mind. As far as taking data from Hadoop, we do allow for the load. We have a couple load CSV and Neo4j import, which will take data in CSV extracts out. Additionally, you can write custom unmanaged extensions using our Java API to connect into your Hadoop cluster and run queries against your Impala or Hive tables or HBase and bring data back in and put it into Neo4j, or conversely take data from Neo4j out to your Hadoop cluster. So those are a couple options that you have, and we're also looking at other ways to do a little bit more real-time data traversals back and forth. Yeah, feel free to send me an email or drop me a note if you have specific questions on that.
And I'm just dropping Dave's email into that chat panel as well. So I have a follow-up question from Christine, and this one I think would be best for Kamille. So she's saying that their MDM solution now has great identity resolution, but not great relationship management. So how does Neo4j handle identity resolution?
Well, it handles it just fine, and you shouldn't have to choose between handling one certain type of data, but then not being able to deal with the relationships around that data type. That's a false choice, Christine. You can store, process, retrieve, do everything you need to do with your data in the context of data relationships when you have the data stored and processed in Neo4j. And so I don't know if you remember the slide that shows that you can migrate some of your data. So if you'd like to do that, just migrate just some of it or duplicate it, and you can be running your existing solutions alongside Neo4j and really just surface the data relationship portion in Neo4j. That's fine. It's up to you. But I don't like hearing that you have to choose between different ways of handling data, because it doesn't have to be that way.
Great, thanks.
I'll add one more comment on that, Adam. So I think, we definitely will complement and sit alongside. So if you have a solution in place that is deduping data or figuring out what the proper address is for a person, or identifying multiple denorm, or just correcting your data as it goes along, we definitely can take that information and bring it into Neo4j. So in those cases, we aren't replacing your other tools that are doing that, but we would definitely be complementary and fit alongside that tool that you're already using.
Great. And we're getting lots of great questions, so I appreciate them, and feel free to keep adding those into typing them into the questions section. So I have a few people asking though questions about, they have a legacy system, and how easy would it be to add or transfer data to Neo4j. Vivek is asking specifically about having MongoDB and Neo4j run in polyglot persistence. So Dave, I don't know if you could talk a little bit more about those kind of ideas.
Sure. Right now, Neo4j does have a JDBC driver, so there are ways that we can programmatically connect between the systems and do updates back and forth. We're looking to make that easier going forward, to simplify that. So Neo4j would have a native way of connecting to your legacy databases and doing reads and writes and updates. Right now, it would be a little bit of a programming effort to build that connector out. There are some, I know Talend has a connector that it's a pretty powerful ETL tool that can connect to almost any database, and it can write out to Neo4j, so that's an option as well. And then as far as Polyglot, I know we do have some customers that are doing that, coinciding with Mongo and Neo4j, and I will have to look up some details on that. So maybe you can jump on to the next question while I look that up.
Definitely, and we can hop to another one. And Cami, maybe you can speak a little bit to Dwayne's question: does Neo4j address data governance?
Yes, absolutely, and that's a question near to my heart because I've been working on data governance since about 2010, and it's another really sticky, important thing that we get right. So this is going to be a similar answer about the polyglot persistence. You can use whatever your existing systems are, that's fine, alongside of Neo4j. And what's really terrific about Neo4j is that ACID compliance so that you have the utmost trustability and data integrity. Often these NoSQL databases ask you to let go of consistency, and they try to say a lot about eventual consistency or whatnot, and that just doesn't play very well in data governance. So I would encourage you to experiment, bring in Neo4j in a development environment and just let it run the paces for you, and you'll be pleasantly surprised that you can ask those complex questions that are based on data relationships, really that only Neo4j can help you do, alongside your existing data governance infrastructure.
Hey, Adam, I'll talk, just going back on the MongoDB. So some people will actually keep their MongoDB or their other relational, it can be another relational database, and use that as is and continue to use it for the functions that they were using it for. And then they'll extract out the data into Neo4j and leverage Neo4j to understand the relationships, to traverse those relationships, and leverage Neo4j's speed at traversing those and finding patterns. And then they'll place a pointer or some kind of a link back into MongoDB. So if it's a document that they want to retrieve back, they can click on that and go back into Mongo and pull out the data that they found. Or if it's some kind of a key value pair that they can click into their key value store database, or if it's a document or something that they've stored elsewhere, they can use it that way. So that's an example of doing the polyglot and using them both that way.
Great, thanks. And Dave, while we have you around, I have another person asking about managing transactional data in a graph database. More specifically, how it's done.
Neo4j handles transactions, so we're a fully transactional database, and we set a transaction level, and you will do writes, and all those are open within a transaction, and then you will commit after a certain number, and those are written into our database and written into our transactional log. So if we have problems later, we can go back. If there's problems with it, we just do a rollback. So it handles transactions. It handles that well. And in 2.2, we've made improvements in how we write the transactions out to disk. So in the past, we used to make a write for each transaction, and it was up to the developer or the programmer to sometimes create internal batches and then try and flush those all out at once. We've changed that model in 2.2 where we handle that internally, and so we internally queue up several transactions and then flush those all out to disk at once, so it's only one disk write. And we've seen great performance improvements in 2.2 over the previous versions. So I hope that answers the transaction question. If you have more details, feel free to, again, send me a note.
Thanks, Dave. And then I have one I think both you, Dave, and Cami could help answer, and it's from Safa. He's asking, can you talk about the infrastructure requirements to handle large-scale Neo4j deployments and scalability? And also, what's the largest Neo4j deployment so far?
Sure. You know, it's always a question that comes up. You know, how big is big data and how big is my graph? So I know we've had customers that have had over half the Facebook link graph in their data set. So that's a large amount. I'm not sure on the number of largest number of nodes or largest number of relationships, but I know we're in some instances billions of nodes, billions of relationships. And we can scale out to 34 billion nodes, 34 billion relationships, 68 billion properties. So that's a large amount of data. For that, we will work with you to understand the size and the number of nodes and relationships, and then we will work with you to get the best machine. You know, we want to load as much data into memory, so that helps the traversal speed and the ability to query and return relationships. So generally, we recommend a machine with a large amount of memory, fast disks, and then will help to set up clustering. So the enterprise version has high availability clustering, so where you would have a master server that handles the write load, and then we can scale the reads across multiple machines that handle reads for different customers. So I think the largest cluster I've seen has been about 86 servers, 86 machines. So, and the reason for that is to handle the real-time queries. So they want millisecond response time for their queries, and we're able to provide that. So it's not a large volume of data, but it's really handling a large volume of reads.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. And then I would just add that what I said before, that we have customers like eBay, Walmart, and other huge household names who are running us in production, and they have not hit scale issues. So, you know, just talk to us about what your needs are, and we'll be able to come up with the right configuration for you.
Thanks. And I have another question. Is Srinivasa is asking, you know, how does Neo4j support changing information? So suppose a customer changes their address 3 or 4 times in the past 5 years. Is there any way that you could see those changes over time for the customer in the same graph?
Sure. So if you're tracking, if you want to track the history, we have ways of setting up what we would do is probably set up some kind of a time tree, so create nodes and relationships to show time, and then we can create nodes and relationships that would show activity or current activity or the history of that changing over time. So I will drop, I have a blog post that shows how you can do time-based version graphs. So, and the point there is that you will create like these state nodes and relationships to really show here's the state of that person's address at a certain point of time, and then using Cypher you can easily reconstruct the history that that person has taken and how their address has changed over time, or maybe they've joined a different company, or maybe the server is was used at this point, now it's no longer used, but we can definitely handle time-based versioning. And I'll drop that link into the chat window.
And I've seen a couple of questions come across to me directly. So one person asked, what issues have Walmart and eBay hit? What should we be on the lookout for? Maybe you didn't hear me, or sometimes I don't speak too clearly. They have not hit any issues. That was my point, is that we've got Walmart and eBay running in production, and they have not run into any issues. Another question is, there are already commercial MDM products based on Neo4j, for example, Pitney Bowes, and what would be the incentive to pursuing implementing MDM on our own versus purchasing a license from Pitney Bowes? We are so excited about our partnership with Pitney Bowes. Pitney Bowes has been presenting the Neo4j MDM use case with great success, great fanfare. They're getting a ton of buzz about what they've been able to build there. So we couldn't be happier with what they've got. And that's really just a decision for your organization. You know, different teams want to build their own applications, maybe for whatever proprietary information they might be dealing with. And then other teams would rather license something from a great vendor like Pitney Bowes. So I would encourage you to just look into both scenarios, contact us, see what the requirements of your application are. Does it make sense to build your own, or does it make more sense to go the route of Pitney Bowes? And you know, they've had so much success with getting that elusive 360-degree view of the customer. So we highly encourage you to look at Pitney Bowes or, you know, work with us if you want to build your own. That's just up to you.
Yeah, I would say, you know, most of the problems are addressed up front when we work together as a partnership and we understand your requirements and what you're trying to do. It's when, you know, customers spend a lot of time and then at the 11th hour, at 11:58 on a Friday night when they want to go live on the weekend, that they run into issues and have not talked to us about scaling or data importing. So being proactive and working with your sales rep or your field engineers to be proactive so that everyone understands what's expected goes a long way to make sure that you don't run into these problems or issues. So there were a couple questions on Sparkle, and we do have a plugin that does support Sparkle and supports the latest standard, and I'm trying to find that. So you could actually use it as a triple store, and you can write Sparkle queries against it. I have not done that. I find Cypher is just a lot easier to understand than writing Sparkle queries, but it's something you can do.
Thanks, Dave. I have another question, or a few people have been asking a question about kind of multiple synonyms of an entity, right? And you know, how to handle the multiple identity problem. And I was wondering, Dave, if you had more information on that.
Sure. So the question is how to handle you know, multiple identities or multiple synonyms. So I'll kind of tackle it without an example. So Neo4j is a labeled property graph, so we can apply labels to nodes. So in our examples, if a person writes a book, we can label that node as a person node. So John Smith would have a label of person, but he could also have a label of author. So we can create different, so we can type that node in a couple different ways. So when we're looking for queries on authors, we can look just specifically for nodes that have the label author as opposed to querying the entire graph. We also support properties on nodes and on relationships. So you can add multiple key value properties on that node. So I'm just trying to think of of an example where you could theoretically have home address and work address and other things on the node that would work. It might be a better model to split out address and create a relationship, but there are ways that we can handle those synonyms and tackle it that way.
Great, thanks. And
I saw a question come. Oh,
go ahead, Kamille.
I saw a question come through asking, it says, Kamille, could you point out a real to-the-point example where typical client data can no longer be stored in a relational database, but where you need the hierarchical quote structure? So my point about the hierarchy is that your MDM data is actually not a hierarchy. It's a graph. And in the past, you had to represent your data as a hierarchy because that's what your database required. So I showed a slide. I don't really want to flip through because that could make people kind of dizzy, but I showed a slide early on that had employee data, and you had the name of the employee and then certain relationships represented, and the whole thing in the old way is represented a very top-down, tree-like hierarchical structure. But the reason that doesn't work is, I mean, it never really did work, but we sort of fudged and pretended it did. But now people aren't even willing to pretend that it works because everyone knows that a given employee, yes, has one manager, but also has dotted line relationships and has work history where they also worked on this other kind of special team for a special project that no longer exists. But when you want to create a similar type project 6 months from now, you want to be able to surface that information, that that person actually has that expertise and can be part of your new team. And then you also want to be able to keep track of different work locations and different awards and maybe a promotion path, all these different types of complex queries that you just cannot represent in the traditional hierarchical way that's just looking manager, boss, work location, and none of that complex stuff is surfaced. So that was my point around the hierarchy versus the graph. And you can see it with patients and doctors and hospitals and prescriptions and those kinds of relationships. You can see it in networks. You can see it in lots of different ways. And if you'd like more examples, just drop me a note and I'd love to talk to you about even more ways.